The early 1st century AD was a time of great expansion for the Roman Empire. Under the leadership of Emperor Augustus, Rome sought to extend its influence into Germania, a region of untamed wilderness and fierce independent tribes. The Romans, renowned for their military prowess and organizational skills, had every reason to believe they could conquer and civilize this land, as they had so many others. To oversee the integration of Germania into the empire, Augustus appointed Publius Quinctilius Varus, a trusted and experienced military commander. Varus was tasked with maintaining peace and extending Roman rule, a mission he approached with confidence. He commanded 3 legions, composed of around 15,000 to 20,000 well-trained soldiers. These were the finest troops Rome had to offer, veterans of numerous campaigns. The region, however, was far from subdued. Beneath the surface of Roman control simmered a deep-seated resentment among the Germanic tribes. These tribes were proud and fiercely independent, chafing under Roman demands for tribute and their attempts to impose a foreign way of life. Among them was Arminius, a chieftain of the Cherusci tribe. Arminius had been trained as a Roman soldier and served as an officer in the Roman auxiliary forces. He had earned Varus's trust and was regarded as a valuable ally, but Arminius had other plans. He resented the Roman presence and was determined to drive them out of his homeland. Using his position of trust, Arminius began to secretly unite the various Germanic tribes, preparing them for a massive rebellion against their occupiers. His knowledge of Roman tactics and strategies would prove to be a crucial advantage. As summer turned to autumn in the year 9 AD, Arminius saw his opportunity. He convinced Varus that a minor uprising was taking place in the north, urging him to move his legions through the heart of the Teutoburg Forest to quell the rebellion. Varus, believing in Arminius's loyalty and the security of his position, agreed. He led his men into the dense, dark forest, unaware of the deadly trap that awaited them. This decision would lead to one of the most catastrophic defeats in Roman history, forever altering the course of the empire's expansion and marking the beginning of the end for Rome's ambitions in Germania. As Varus and his legions set out on their march into the heart of the Teutoburg Forest, they did so with the confidence of seasoned warriors. Each soldier was heavily armed, carrying a large shield, a gladius, and a set of pila, but their strength became a burden in the dense forest. The terrain was unlike anything they had encountered before. Towering trees, thick underbrush, and swampy ground. Progress was slow and arduous, made worse by the persistent rain that turned the paths into a muddy quagmire. Arminius, riding alongside Varus, maintained a facade of loyalty. He assured Varus that the path was secure and that they would soon quash the minor rebellion he had fabricated. In reality, Arminius was putting the final touches on his deadly plan. He had secretly rallied various Germanic tribes, positioning warriors in strategic locations along the route the Romans would take. The Romans, confident in their superiority and trusting Arminius, did not suspect betrayal. They allowed him and his fellow Germanic auxiliaries to scout ahead, unaware that they were being led into a trap. The deeper they ventured into the forest, the more precarious their situation became. The narrow paths forced the legions to stretch out into long, vulnerable columns, making coordinated defense nearly impossible. As they marched deeper, the first signs of trouble appeared. Roman scouts sent ahead failed to return, raising a flicker of unease among the ranks. Varus, however, trusting in Arminius's loyalty, decided to press on. The forest seemed to close in around them, the towering trees blocking out the light and casting eerie shadows. Then, without warning, the silence was shattered by the war cries of thousands of Germanic warriors. The initial assault was swift and brutal. Arrows and javelins rained down from the dense canopy above, striking the Roman soldiers from all sides. The Romans, caught completely off guard, struggled to form defensive positions. The narrow, muddy paths and thick underbrush prevented them from deploying their usual formations. The disciplined ranks of the Roman legions disintegrated into chaotic clusters of men desperately trying to fend off unseen attackers. Arminius's deep understanding of Roman tactics now worked against Varus. The Germanic warriors specifically targeted officers and standard-bearers, creating confusion and disrupting the Roman command structure. The Romans attempted to regroup and counterattack, but the hit-and-run tactics of the Germanic fighters made it impossible. The Germans would strike from the shadows, inflict casualties, and then vanish back into the forest. The Romans were accustomed to open-field battles where they could use their superior formations and discipline. In the forest, these advantages were nullified. The unfamiliar terrain and constant harassment from the Germanic warriors took a heavy toll. The soldiers were forced to fight in small, isolated groups, unable to support each other effectively. As night fell, the Romans tried to establish makeshift camps, but rest was elusive. The Germanic tribes continued their harassment, launching surprise attacks under the cover of darkness. The rain poured relentlessly, soaking the soldiers and their supplies, further sapping their strength and morale. By the end of the second day, the situation had become dire. Casualties mounted and supplies dwindled. The realization of their predicament began to sink in. They were deep in enemy territory, surrounded by a hostile force that knew the terrain intimately. Retreat was not an option. They were trapped. Arminius, meanwhile, kept the pressure on. He coordinated his forces with ruthless efficiency, ensuring that the Romans had no opportunity to regroup or mount a coordinated defense. The Germanic warriors, driven by a fierce desire to expel the invaders, fought with relentless determination. For the Romans, every step forward was a struggle, every rustle in the underbrush a potential threat. The once invincible legions of Rome were now a desperate and fragmented force, fighting for their survival in the unforgiving depths of the Teutoburg Forest. Teutoburg Forest was a scene of utter chaos and carnage. As Varus's legions pressed deeper into the forest, Arminius and his united Germanic tribes intensified their assault. The Romans, now strung out along narrow, muddy paths, found themselves completely vulnerable. The Germanic warriors, hidden in the dense underbrush and towering trees, launched wave after wave of attacks from every direction. Arrows and javelins rained down, striking Roman soldiers who struggled to form any semblance of a defensive line. The terrain was a nightmare. Thick mud sucked at their feet, fallen trees blocked their paths, and visibility was minimal. The Roman soldiers were exhausted, hungry, and soaked to the bone from the relentless rain. Fear and panic spread through the ranks as they realized they were being systematically hunted down. The Germanic tribes, relentless and unyielding, closed in tighter. The Romans, now desperate, attempted to break out of the forest and reach open ground. Arminius anticipated this move. He positioned his warriors for a final devastating ambush at the forest's edge, where the Romans hoped to find safety. As the Romans emerged from the forest, they were met with a coordinated and ferocious assault. Arrows and spears rained down on them, and Germanic warriors charged with terrifying speed and precision. The once disciplined and formidable Roman legions were now a disorganized and exhausted mob, unable to mount a cohesive defense. The final moments of the battle were brutal. Surrounded on all sides, the Roman soldiers fought with the courage of desperation, but they were no match for the fresh and determined Germanic warriors. The battlefield became a slaughterhouse. The air was filled with the sounds of clashing weapons, the cries of the wounded, and the shouts of victory from the Germanic tribes. Varus, witnessing the complete annihilation of his forces, faced the grim reality of his situation. With no hope of escape or victory, he chose to take his own life rather than be captured. By the end of the battle, the once proud Roman legions lay in ruins. Nearly 20,000 Roman soldiers were killed, their bodies strewn across the forest floor. The Germanic tribes, victorious and emboldened, had achieved a decisive and historic triumph. Few Roman survivors managed to escape to tell the tale, and the Germans destroyed all Roman forts and settlements east of the Rhine River. The news of the disaster would soon reach Rome, sending shockwaves through the empire and marking a turning point in Roman history. The aftermath of the Battle of Teutoburg Forest was a time of profound shock and introspection for the Roman Empire. News of the catastrophic defeat reached Rome, and the reaction was one of utter disbelief and grief. Emperor Augustus, upon hearing of the loss, was said to have been devastated. He reportedly wandered his palace, repeatedly crying out, "Quintilivare, legiones rede," which translates to "Quintilius Varus, give me back my legions." The immediate impact on Rome was both psychological and strategic. The loss of nearly 20,000 soldiers, including 3 elite legions, was a devastating blow to Rome's military might. The defeat exposed the vulnerability of the Roman legions and shattered the myth of their invincibility. The Roman Empire, which had been on a path of relentless expansion, was forced to reconsider its ambitions. In the wake of the massacre, Augustus ordered a series of reforms to prevent such a disaster from occurring again. The military strategies and tactics were re-evaluated, leading to more cautious and calculated approaches in future campaigns. The Roman Empire shifted from an aggressive expansionist policy to one that focused more on consolidation and defense of existing territories. The Rhine River was established as the definitive boundary of the Roman Empire in the north. The idea of pushing further into Germania was abandoned, and efforts were instead directed towards fortifying the borders. The psychological impact on the Roman populace and military was profound. It instilled a sense of caution and humility in Roman military planning and contributed to a more defensive mindset in the years to come. The Battle of Teutoburg Forest also had lasting consequences for the Germanic tribes. The victory solidified their resolve to resist Roman domination and fostered a sense of unity among the various tribes. Arminius, the architect of the ambush, became a celebrated hero in Germanic history. His success in uniting the tribes and defeating the Romans inspired future generations to resist external domination. The legacy of the battle extended far beyond the immediate aftermath. In the centuries that followed, the story of Teutoburg Forest was recounted as a cautionary tale of hubris and the perils of underestimating one's enemy. In Roman literature and history, the Battle of Teutoburg Forest was immortalized as a moment of profound loss and a pivotal turning point. The writings of historians such as Tacitus and Suetonius captured the gravity of the defeat and its impact on the Roman psyche. The phrase Varian disaster became synonymous with catastrophic military failure. The battlefield itself, once a site of unimaginable carnage, eventually faded back into the forest. For centuries, the exact location was lost to history until modern archaeological efforts uncovered evidence of the battle. Today, the site is marked and remembered as a place of historical significance, where one of the most significant clashes between Rome and the Germanic tribes took place. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed diving into the Battle of Teutoburg Forest, check out our other videos exploring and retelling history's greatest people and events. And if you want to support our channel, consider joining our Patreon community.